Hello and welcome to our conversation today. I'm Jill Nicholson. I'm a psychotherapist, and today I have with me the lovely Sarah Parker. Sarah, I've been so looking forward to this conversation because Sarah does works with many issues, but is a real specialist in the field of working with clients with anorexia. And you have such a richness of experience, but also you have a very unique and very important perspective on how to help clients. And so I'm kind of enthralled today to just hear more about your work. So I think a lot of us psychotherapists, I know I don't work with clients who have anorexia because I feel it is very specialized. And I think you need a specific training and experience to do that. So I would love to hear about that. But before we get to there, would you like to just introduce yourself? Give us the highlights.
Oh, thank you, Jill. Yes, I am Sarah Parker. I am a psychotherapist who my background is working in the NHS, both in general mental health teams, but also in a specialist eating disorder team. And I guess, the highlight of that, Jill, as you know, is that I went into working into that service after many years ago also being a patient in that service with anorexia nervosa. And so I think that for me, it's about really deeply understanding anorexia nervosa from a personal experience and perspective, but also from a clinical perspective. And I think I'm really careful to know that my experience of anorexia nervosa is mine. There are a lot of similarities across many people, but everybody is unique and everybody's an individual. But I think that that experience is really important in giving me a different perspective on how I work and how I kind of share with people too.
Absolutely. And I don't know another therapist who works with clients with anorexia who has this perspective. And I absolutely think it gives your clients a huge advantage, because it's not theoretical, it's not protocols, it's not strategies, it's not interventions. This is a place that you absolutely have known yourself and come through. And how long have you been in recovery now, Sarah?
Oh my goodness, my last admission was 2006, 2007. So it's 18 years now.
Okay, so it's
And
been
so it's
really
a long
long.
time. Yeah. I was in and out of hospital for 15 years with anorexia nervosa. And I think that for many of those years, particularly towards the end, I had lost hope of ever being able to live without this illness. And so for me, one of the most significant parts is holding that hope, even when people can't see it. It's knowing that it's there, even when it's not visible.
Oh my gosh. What a beacon for clients, because it can be such a desperate place, can't it?
It can be. And I think also sometimes we've got to acknowledge, I've got to acknowledge that that can be a lot for clients too. Clients in the midst of that lack of hope sometimes can find hope overwhelming. I think often when I'm working with people
Mm.
with eating disorders, but particularly with anorexia nervosa, what I understand is the plate will signify what that person is struggling with in life. And often it's too much. And if I bring in too much hope or too much positivity or too much, then that becomes overwhelming. And they say, no, I'm pushing that plate away. It's too much.
Mm.
So I hold it and I will kind of share bits of it, but always being careful that that sharing isn't too overwhelming.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense because I think for any of us, if we're here and we want to get to here, but we don't quite know how to, and we've got a bit of hope, but maybe we're scared, is it even possible? Someone who's like, yeah, la, 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 it can be too big a gap, can't it, between where the client is and that experience. And I can absolutely see why then it would be, kind of rejection. One of the things I've always wondered about is for someone like yourself who specializes in this area, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about anorexia, and how do those impact your therapeutic process with clients?
Goodness. I think one of the biggest, most obvious misconception. Well, I say most obvious, but probably it's a misconception because it isn't obvious, and that's the difficulty, is that anorexia is about food and weight. People we talk about eating disorders. It's disordered eating. It's eating that's not right. But actually, we would be much better to talk about eating disorders as thinking disorders.
Yeah.
Because for most people, there isn't a physical problem with eating. There isn't a physical problem with, how they put food in their mouth. And it's the thoughts around the food, the thoughts around weight, shape, and body. And I think that we have to acknowledge that whilst I am absolutely not saying, Jill, that an eating disorder isn't a problem, it wasn't the original problem. An
Yeah.
eating disorder is a solution to a problem that went before.
Oh, I'm absolutely on the same page as you, Sarah. As you know, I work with emotional eaters. Having been one in my younger days, and lost over 120 pounds and eventually kept off when I realised it wasn't really about the food. It wasn't really about what was put, it was about what I was putting in my mouth, but the bigger picture or the primary problem was the emotions I was trying to regulate or change or suppress or numb. And I love the way you put that, almost as if the difficulties around food, the disordered eating is the symptom, but actually specifically the cause,
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah. And if we forget that there is a cause, if we only ever focus on food and weight, we're missing the main part of the picture.
Yeah.
I think, we have to look at, okay, what went before this? What was it that created? And similarly, when we're looking at, for want of a better word, recovery, I prefer to talk about change.
Mhm.
But if we talk about what most people talk about in recovery, we're not looking to recover the person that was before the eating disorder, because that person was struggling so much that
Yeah.
they developed an eating disorder. So we're
Yeah.
looking at change moving forward, not back to where that person was, but forward to something new and different, which
Mhm.
is incredibly daunting and fearful for a lot of people. For most people within an eating disorder, they lose sight of themselves, and almost their identity becomes very
Yeah.
fixed with that eating disorder. And so to then say, well, we're going to work on this not being your identity, but also we're not going to use the identity before, we're going to create a whole new identity. For me, that's really exciting work. But for the person that I'm working with, often it's really frightening, and stepping into the unknown is,
Mhm.
is really daunting. So it takes a lot of time and trust and patience.
Mm. Yeah, yes. No, I get that. I've worked in the field of substance use, and in some ways it's very similar. Like, who is the person when they're not using and they've lost sight of that identity, and they may well tell you, not that I'm so and so and I'm this age and I love cooking. It's like I'm so and so, I'm this age, I'm a drug addict.
Yeah,
And that point of, yeah, okay,
yeah.
and who will they become?
That,
Who
and
will,
I think, Jill, it's it's really cautious work because whilst on the one hand, you and I know that the people that we're working with are not drug addicts or people with an eating disorder. They are human beings that are struggling to cope in a world that looks tricky to them. And so the importance of connecting to that human being and nourishing them and helping them to grow.
Mhm,
Because if we don't, and if we only look at an illness, if we only focus on what do we do with this illness,
mhm, mhm,
well, we're missing nourishing the human being that we want to develop and
mhm,
help them to see, oh, this is what I'm about. I am more than this.
mhm, mhm.
I think for me in my past, that was the biggest thing that
That's what I was just about to ask you. Yeah. Was that your experience when you were?
absolutely. I had many hospital admissions, some of which were I was detained. It was against my choice, some of which, you know, I was in for a long time.
Mhm.
And and there were a lot of good people offering really good help, but they often missed me,
Yeah. Yeah.
what I needed. They were really good at looking at, okay, what do we need to do to work with this eating disorder? But I became invisible. And actually, what we know is one of the things that an eating disorder does is give us something to hide behind. It becomes a mask so that we feel safe behind it. And so nobody ever kind of said to me, step forward, Sarah, and face your fears of being seen.
Yeah.
And and on my last admission, there were two people that were significant. One was a health support worker that was that was like a Yorkshire Terrier, really. She was not going to allow me to be that quiet little mouse that
Oh,
did.
right. In a good way. Right.
Oh,
Okay.
in an
Oh,
absolutely brilliant way. She had me going out and she'd step back and put me forward, and I was terrified. But so often we laughed about it afterwards. But actually, what was really significant was I had a therapist that said to me one day, Sarah, have you ever thought about counselling? And I laughed and I said, I've had years of counselling. What are you talking about? And she said, no, no, you being the counsellor. And Jill, in that moment,
mhm.
I saw that I was more than an eating disorder.
Oh, wow. That's,
I
oh,
saw the healthy, thriving part of me that I had not connected to maybe ever.
wow.
And because she saw it, I saw it. So it wasn't some clever therapeutic intervention. It was me being seen for more than an eating disorder. And I carry that through all the work I do because whilst it can be really scary to be seen for clients, it's
Yeah.
really important that little by little by little we let them know that we see them, we're curious about them, we're interested in them, and we're here for them, not the eating disorder.
Yeah. Absolutely powerful. Really powerful. I think that being seen, I think for all of us humans is really important. Excuse me, to have people around who get us,
Yeah.
who get us without judgment, without an agenda, that we feel known,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we feel known when we're ready, even if we
Yes.
just start with the littlest bit,
Absolutely.
and then move on.
Yeah.
Um, excuse me. I wanted to ask you about if you find there's a role or even a correlation when working with clients with anorexia. Do you find that co-current there might be traits like perfectionism or procrastination, or what do you find is under that once we get away from the behaviors? It's not just about the food. When we begin to see the person, what else makes up part
Mm.
of the identity of somebody
Yeah.
who's to you? I'm going to flip on my tea, excuse me.
You go for it, Jill. I think often there are, and we say that this is a thinking disorder. It's not an eating disorder. Um, but we term it an eating disorder. And there are some very similar thinking patterns that we will see, one of which is perfectionism, that need to be perfect, and kind of quite dichotomous thinking, black and white thinking. It's either this or it's this, but it can't be anything in between.
Good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we have to acknowledge that their neurodivergence is massively overrepresented in the eating disorder field.
Ah,
And so we see often I will see people that present with eating disorders who may also be dyslexic and have struggled at school. They may be autistic, they may be ADHD, and those thinking styles and thinking patterns often go alongside. But with anorexia, often we will see that drive for perfectionism, which in and of itself is a coping mechanism. Often
absolutely.
when we've been criticized or we've struggled to belong in this world, we find we kind of tell ourselves, well, if I can be perfect, A, nobody will criticize me, and B, people might want me around. And so we've got to look out for all of these things which are barriers to integrating back into society, which makes the eating disorder or the perfectionism useful. And whilst ever
Yeah,
something that we do is useful, we're
yeah,
going to struggle to let go of it.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
working with all of those kind of thinking styles and finding ways that we can soften the edges a little bit, perhaps.
That makes such a lot of sense because in my work I see when someone is arrives into therapy and there's a strong element of really I'm only okay if I'm perfect. I'm only okay if my boss thinks I'm perfect. I'm only okay if my hair's perfect. If I don't have a bad hair day, I'm only perfect if I always say the right thing. And it's that sense of almost safety.
Yeah.
If I'm perfect, I feel a bit safer, and that regulation happens. But it becomes a double bind because there's no perfection. Um,
No,
mhm,
and if we think about it in terms of, I often use ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, when I'm working with clients. And if we think about it in terms of workability, a solution to a problem, if it's workable, it can be used long term and it doesn't cause us any kind of problems or harm in the long term.
mhm,
If it isn't so workable, then it's problematic. And
mhm,
perfectionism isn't really workable. It might be all right if we have one area of our life that we like to be perfect. I, I like to have my hair done every morning or whatever it might be. If that doesn't impinge on life, then that's
yeah,
okay. It's workable. But if we are kind of made into statues because we can't do anything unless it's perfect,
yeah.
then it's not workable and it's not helpful. And it's finding ways to work with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like that image of a statue is so clear because almost how we humans can become paralyzed
Yeah.
with something like that, perfectionism, and then the procrastination, etc., all comes in. But I find that as well with clients, something like having to be perfect is always a defense
Yeah.
against something else. And often, I'm being very general here, but it's like feeling not good enough.
Yeah.
How do you cope with not feeling good enough? Well, you be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
make myself better. And actually, it's about acceptance of, okay, this is who I am, this is how I am.
Mhm,
And I might sometimes want to strive to do something a bit more or a bit different, and I'm not going to stop learning. But even if I don't change it
mhm,
right now in this moment, I'm okay. And I
mhm,
think that we don't see that very much in the world, do we? There isn't an awful lot of acceptance. From a young age, we go to school and it's important, but okay, you've got to get better, you've got to learn, you've got to get higher marks, you've got to and moment by moment, if we can see in this moment, I'm enough. There
mhm,
might be a different time and place where I do more and I can do more, but in
mhm,
this moment, I'm
mhm.
enough.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful because it's saying,
Mhm,
accept you sat in front of me just
mhm,
as you are.
mhm. Thank you. Thank you for that. Can I ask you about the difference in working with clients who are overcoming anorexia and those overcoming bulimia? Because I know we work with clients who are bulimic, but
Mm.
not with anorexia. So I'm really interested on your take about what is different.
And I think, you know, at the end of the day, they're both human beings struggling. So there are lots of similarities.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
I think that they've both bulimia and anorexia nervosa are just ways of coping. So when we look at it like that, we can see the similarities. But I
mhm.
think for me, working with anorexia, there are some things to be really aware of. And one of those is the importance of physical monitoring. Um,
Mhm,
I don't work with people with anorexia who haven't got a good relationship with their GP and don't have physical monitoring. So, blood work, blood pressure, ECG for some people. So I think it's really important to attend. To be fair, it's important to attend to that too with bulimia nervosa in determining potassium levels. So I think again, the similarities that both require that physical monitoring. We need to know what's going on inside the body.
Yeah.
But I think when I'm working with people with anorexia nervosa, again, it's really central to look at their eating style because it'll give us clues.
Mhm.
Often with anorexia, we'll see that people want to go more slowly. It's
Mhm.
so important to go at the right pace for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody with anorexia nervosa, they may come all guns blazing and they may, okay, I want this to change. And then the fear hits.
Yeah.
They may not come all guns blazing and they may come and say, don't
Mhm,
come too close. And
mhm,
it's really about respecting that process. It's saying, okay, if if what you take in needs to
mhm,
be small and measured,
mhm,
we're going to do that with therapy. We're going to make it measured. We're going to make it at your pace. We're going to make it in your time. And
mhm.
of course, we've got to balance that with physical health risk. Of course we do.
Yeah.
But in terms of the emotional and psychological process, we've got to go at a pace that feels fast enough that it's not controlled by the anorexia nervosa,
Okay.
manageable enough for the human being that's sat in front of me. And that's a balance, and it will be slightly different for everyone, Jill. Some
Mm,
people can go faster and take on and take in more. Other
mm,
people, it's going to be slower. I think when we go really slowly, it's really important to keep checking in. Okay, is it the eating disorder that's keeping this slow and the fear, or
mm.
is it that actually that's right for you as a human being? And it's
Okay.
always measuring that, always measuring that. I think also we've got to think about, the reality of recovery from anorexia nervosa means weight restoration.
Mhm,
That may or may not be present in everybody with anorexia nervosa, but people with atypical anorexia nervosa,
mhm,
they may not need to restore weight.
mhm,
But for people who are low weight,
mhm.
whilst a lot of people will want to have a different experience of life and maintain a low weight,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not what we're working towards. We're working towards weight restoration to a weight that their body sits well at. So, I don't necessarily work within BMI. It's about saying, where does your body function best? Where does it feel well? Where can you live life on your terms, doing what matters to you in a
Yeah.
body that fulfills all your needs?
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you then, what what happens if that view of, well, this is the right weight for my body, I function really well, if that's still distorted?
Mm. Then I think I'm always very honest and straightforward with that. I think that bodies are really good at adapting. They're
Mhm,
really good at adapting to famine, thank goodness. Because,
mhm,
when I say to people, our bodies are our best friends,
mhm.
whatever we do to them, they will still try and survive and thrive for us. They may struggle with that, but they will. They will try and adapt.
Mhm.
And I work with people that, and for me, myself, my body was ravaged for a lot of time,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
still somehow it got me through. And I
Mhm.
think that we've got to see that our bodies will adapt. We may
Mhm.
be low weight and our bodies, our blood chemistry might still be all right. We may still be able to function and go to work,
Mhm.
but it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that we're
Mhm.
doing it at our best. We
Yeah,
may not
yeah,
feel as strong as we can. We may not feel able to concentrate as well as we can. We'll have little signs like we feel colder much more than our peers who are a healthier weight.
mhm.
We might struggle to sleep. We might struggle to concentrate and focus.
Yeah, yes.
So there are lots of little signs that we can pick up on that say, okay, maybe this is not where you're meant to be. And I think generally it's very difficult because we don't have anything other than a BMI chart at the moment.
Which,
Um,
am I right in saying it's about 200 years old?
it's coming up to 200 years old
I
and was
didn't know
developed by a mathematician, Jill, not even by somebody
that.
working within
I
health.
was blown away by that. I'm like,
Yeah, but sadly at the moment we have very little else. So at best it's a general guide.
okay.
Um,
Mhm.
but I think we've got to look at the lifestyle of the person. We've got to be realistic. And I know, and I've been there, Jill. I wanted to believe that my body could be healthier at a much lower weight, and it wasn't. It wasn't.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I didn't have the strength I needed. I didn't have the energy I needed. My heart rate slowed down. I developed extra hair to try and keep my body warm because
Yeah,
it was cold. And all of those signs are the immense ability of a body to try and regulate,
yes,
making it work really hard.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not its natural state.
yeah, yeah. And I like the idea of almost valuing or maybe even befriending our bodies. So, some of my work is with trauma, anxiety, but also emotional eaters. And having been one where actually we're at war with our body.
Yeah,
We're at
absolutely.
war, we're full of, oh, look at this bit here, or I don't look like X, or this doesn't fit. And it's like a lot of hostility, even aggression towards our bodies, that idea of a peaceful, valuing relationship of our bodies and just what the homeostasis they must do in every uh, system within our body every second is astounding.
And trust, Jill. We don't trust our bodies. We lose trust in our bodies because we feel that they're to blame. They've let us down. And I know for me that one of my narratives was my body has made me look ridiculous. And it's meant that people have bullied me. It's meant that, I don't fit in this world because of how I look, because I was overweight as a child. And it was all my body's fault. And actually, my bodies don't have an agenda. They just want to stay alive for us. That's all they want, and even, through recovery and the times that I restored weight in hospital, my body's restoring weight too quickly. It's just working against me. And what was really central in my recovery was being able to, at first, I couldn't make friends with my body. That was a step too far, but I
Yeah,
called a truce. I wasn't going to be at war with my body. I didn't quite trust it and I couldn't quite befriend it yet, but
yeah.
I stopped being aggressive towards it.
Mhm,
And slowly, slowly, with the use of compassion,
mhm,
I started to see, okay, me and you can work together. We
mhm,
can be one. We can start to integrate. And actually, I think we have to think of our relationship with our body as we would with any other relationship.
yeah,
We talk a lot, and there's a lot in the media about loving our bodies, about
mhm.
kind of, and I think sometimes that's a step too far for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I think it feels a bit unreachable, and then people give up. And I think if we think about any loving relationship, and I think that's where it's at, it's having a loving relationship with our body, where we're
Mhm.
allowed to get cross, we're allowed to get frustrated. I know in my relationship, I can
Yeah,
sometimes get really cross and frustrated. It doesn't take away the love. It
yeah,
doesn't stop me wanting to do the best for that person.
yeah,
And neither does it for my body. But sometimes it's all right to look in the mirror and think, oh, and then think, okay, and then we'll get on with our day together because we're in this together.
Yeah, gosh, that's such a nugget of information about that loving relationship with our body and being able to also hold, I'm not happy at it just now in some way, and it's still be okay. I'm aware of your time, and so as we finish, I have a question for you, but I also wanted also to say that Sarah does train other therapists in the specialism of working with anorexia nervosa, bulimia, and eating disorders. And I also know you have a real interest in working with those who are caring for family members, friends, partners who have anorexia nervosa as well. That it's also wider than the client, isn't it, for you? It's about the next generation of therapists, and it's also about how is the mum, how is the spouse, how is the that I think it's just worthwhile saying that. And if you were to end on anything, any message that you hope that someone takes from this, whether they themselves are a therapist, whether they're someone that's struggling with an eating disorder, whether they're a family member, what would you like to leave them with?
I think the message of hope, Jill, the message of hope. I think if you are a therapist and you're struggling, hear that struggle and think about what is it I'm missing? What is it I'm not seeing? Um, know that we're all human and know that actually when we work with anybody, it's got to be teamwork. It's not my job to make somebody better or to take somebody's eating disorder away, because the more I pull at it, the more
Yeah,
they pull back. It becomes a tug of war.
yeah,
So
yeah.
gently
Yeah.
saying what's happening here, but also it's seeing that even though, you know, if I go on holiday, I can't see the house that I live in. Doesn't mean it's not there.
Oh,
And
wow. Uh-huh.
likewise, just because we can't see hope, just because we can't see a future without this,
Mhm,
doesn't mean to say it's not there. And I would say remain curious.
mhm,
Always be open that this is where we're at, but it
mhm.
might not be where we are forever.
Oh, oh, wow. What a beautiful way to finish. Sarah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Jill. It's an
Oh,
absolute joy to talk with you because I
oh,
know that you bring such a lot to the conversation, and I'm really grateful to have this conversation with you.
oh, well, thank you. I mean, I enjoy any time in a natter with you. The fact that we're doing it on this subject and recorded is also lovely. So we hope that's been informative, helpful. Hopefully it has opened a little glimmer of light. Someone is watching and is in the process of this journey. And thank you for joining us. And
And
yeah,
Jill, just quickly before we go, if people want to find you and seek you out for support, how would they find you?
so my website is Jill with a J, nicholsoncoaching.com. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. Thank you. We should say the same about you. Where do people find you?
And my website is wellofbeing.co.uk. You can find me there around on social media as we both are. But
Yeah,
yes, if you head there, that's the best place to find contacts.
that's great. Thank you. So join us next time when we'll be talking all things of mind, thinking, emotions, eating, bodies. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.